It's wild to think my son's graduation from college would actually play out this way. The whole thing at the University of Minneapolis was picture perfect. The sun was shining bright, you could feel the pride radiating from all the families, and everyone was buzzing with that amazing feeling of success. Nathan had put in an unbelievable amount of effort to get his business degree, and I couldn't have been more bursting with pride. But what should have easily been one of the most joyful days of our lives completely transformed into something else. I'm Anna, and after being married for a quarter of a century, I was pretty sure I knew my husband, Benjamin. We had created a good life in Minneapolis. We raised our son, and I was under the impression that we were content. I was employed as a financial advisor, and Benjamin was in charge of his own consulting business. We weren't rich by any means, but we'd been diligent about saving for a long time, looking ahead to retirement and helping Nathan later in life. Later that day, as we were getting together to take pictures after the graduation, Benjamin started behaving in a really weird way. He wouldn't stop looking at his phone and was constantly glancing all over the place, like he was nervous. His assistant, Rebecca, was there as well, supposedly to help get the celebratory dinner in order, but something about her being there just felt wrong. She was young, probably in her early 30s, and had been employed by Benjamin for the last couple of years. The moment happened when it was time for the champagne toast. Benjamin stood up, holding his champagne glass, and I fully expected him to say something sweet about Nathan's big accomplishment. Instead, he paused to clear his throat, and then declared, "I have something really important I need to tell everyone." The way those words came out made my heart sink right into my stomach. I recognized that expression. In the career I've carved out for myself, I've been a witness to so many individuals attempting to mask their anxieties before they commit to choices that dramatically alter the course of their lives. "I'm out of here," he carried on, his tone even though icy. "Rebecca and I are in love, and we're going to begin a totally new existence together." I had already moved our shared funds to guarantee our new beginning was secure. The quiet that descended upon us was absolutely overwhelming. Nathan's complexion lost all its color, and everyone else seemed tense and fidgety in their chairs. Rebecca simply stood there with a victorious grin plastered on her face, her hand firmly and possessively gripping Benjamin's arm. However, as opposed to the shock and complete heartbreak that Benjamin obviously anticipated, I experienced a strange sense of composure. Perhaps it was because I had foreseen this eventuality a while ago. It's entirely possible that I was ready for just this very occasion. I reached out and grabbed my handbag, feeling the solidity of the envelope tucked away inside. About a quarter of a year prior, the initial cause for concern came to my attention when I looked over our shared bank accounts. There were some odd money transfers and pricey accommodations. As someone who gives financial counsel for a living, I'm skilled at noticing things that are out of order, and these expenditures didn't appear to be random indulgences. There was a discernible pattern to them. These charges cropped up consistently on the very days Benjamin swore he was tied up at the office until late. Minneapolis really isn't all that huge, and the very same hotel was a recurring element in these charges. The Marquette, right in the center of the city, only a couple of blocks down from the building where he works, invariably on Wednesday evenings. Without fail, the same room type. I didn't come at him directly and accuse him right then and there. I instead made a decision to start a thorough investigation. 2 decades of working with figures had really drilled patience and accuracy into me. I kept meticulous records of all transactions, all receipts, and any questionable activity concerning our finances. The proof was gradually accumulating. He made dinner bookings for 2 at fancy restaurants, purchased jewelry from Tiffany's, and bought first-class airline tickets to Caribbean islands that were completely unfamiliar to me. Then the money started going to offshore accounts. Benjamin must have thought he was being so sly by stashing cash in a Cayman Islands account. But there was a key thing he overlooked. I had been in charge of our tax preparation for the last decade and a half. I was familiar with all the legitimate accounts, investments, and every single cent we'd managed to save together. These unexpected financial movements were incredibly obvious. My friend Laura, who works in HR at Benjamin's job, ultimately provided the final piece. One afternoon in March, she rang me, sounding uncertain. "Anna, I believe there's something that you ought to be made aware of," she said. Rebecca just submitted a request to move over to your husband's new branch in Bermuda. It was then that I completely understood. Benjamin's actions went beyond a simple affair. He was actually in the process of orchestrating an escape. Suddenly, everything made sense. The cash he was hiding, those secretive bank accounts, the speech he'd been planning to deliver. He'd intentionally picked Nathan's graduation, figuring that the presence of others would stop me from making a scene. What he wasn't aware of was that I had already gotten in touch with my attorney, Patricia. We had been working on the preparations for weeks. The legal papers for our divorce, the freezing of his assets, and the proof of his tax evasion. I had discreetly transferred our funds to a different account, kept records of all the questionable dealings, and collected evidence of his infidelity. I took another drink of my champagne, observing the self-satisfied look on Benjamin's face as he wrapped up his announcement. He believed he had masterminded the ideal escape. Little did he know, I was ready to unveil my own meticulously prepared revelation. Once Benjamin finished speaking, Rebecca actually had the nerve to flaunt a first-class airline ticket in front of everyone. "Our plane to Bermuda departs this evening," she boasted, her voice just oozing smugness. "The ideal piece of land right by the ocean has already been secured using your money." A wave of shocked murmurs filled the room. I noticed Nathan's hands shaking with rage, his graduation cap still sitting on his head. Our loved ones squirmed in their chairs, uncertain about whether to leave or stick around for what was sure to be an incredibly dramatic showdown. Benjamin glanced at me, his face showing a combination of gloating and condescension. "I've left enough to cover your costs for several months," he said in a patronizing way. "Considering everything, I think that's more than generous." "Considering what?" I broke in, my voice calm and even. "Considering I was instrumental in creating your consulting business from nothing, that I handled all our money matters so you could focus on work, or maybe considering that I've been aware of your plan for months." His smile became less curt, and Rebecca gripped his arm more tightly. "What are you talking about? You've been aware of this?" she questioned, the self-assured mask she usually wore starting to crumble ever so slightly. I rummaged around in my bag and took out the bulky, tan envelope that I had gotten ready. "You know, Ben, for a guy who considers himself so meticulous, you really dropped the ball when it came to your email security. That one password you've had since forever, Nathan's date of birth, not exactly innovative thinking." His complexion started to lose all its color. I could almost see the wheels turning in his head, desperately trying to recall which emails could be found inside that envelope. "I will admit, the scheme you came up with was pretty ingenious," I went on, standing up so I could look him straight in the eyes. "Creating that bank account in Bermuda, organizing this reveal at Nathan's graduation ceremony, thinking I'd be too embarrassed to cause a scene. But you overlooked one really important thing about yours truly." "And what would that be?" he somehow croaked out, his voice sounding a little raspy. "It's not just my family's money that I handle. This is actually what I do for a living." Did you honestly believe I would miss the money being moved around? The bills from the hotel? That hidden account you have in the Caymans? I grinned, enjoying the way his eyes got bigger and bigger each time I revealed something new. "Or perhaps you assumed Laura from HR wouldn't tell me about Rebecca wanting to transfer and go work at your brand new Bermuda office." Benjamin's hands began to tremble. Rebecca had taken a pace or two backward, her smile of triumph replaced with a look of unease. "Here you go," I stated, offering him the envelope. "You probably ought to take a look at this before you head off to start your new life. Think of this as my present for achieving a certain milestone, you two." I really enjoyed the feeling as Benjamin gingerly accepted the envelope. The whole truth, all my findings, all my preparations were about to be revealed. The really fantastic part? He hadn't a clue about the surprise in store. With unsteady hands, Benjamin proceeded to tear open the envelope. I quietly relished the scene, observing as he drew out the pile of documents, his eyes growing wider as he quickly read through the initial sheet. The legally submitted and approved divorce filing appeared to mock all his meticulous scheming. He looked up at me, dumbfounded, stammering, "What in the world is this?" I took another drink of champagne, enjoying its refreshing taste. "Oh, just something to read while you're supposedly on vacation," I responded in a sugary tone. "You really should take a look at the third page." Rebecca peeked at the document over his shoulder, her perfectly polished fingernails pressing firmly into his arm as she began reading. The current balance on our shared bank account was made clear by the bank statements. Nothing. I had legally moved every single cent weeks prior into an account exclusively in my name. "You can't actually do this," Benjamin managed to say, his face getting redder. "That's our money." I cut him off, raising one eyebrow and asking, "Our money? Do you mean the money you intended to run off with? The money you've been secretly funneling into international accounts?" I pointed to the next group of files. "And by the way, the IRS is looking into your unorthodox bookkeeping practices." As he quickly scanned the documents, all the color disappeared from his face. The receipts from the hotel, the charges from fancy dinners, printed emails outlining his relationship with Rebecca, and even their arrangements for making this very announcement. Each sheet just hammered his failed attempt to run away deeper into the ground. My son Nathan was standing next to me at that moment. I could hear the soft whooshing sound of his graduation robe as he edged closer. He sounded so choked up when he asked, "Dad, were you really going to go through with this?" Seriously. Benjamin couldn't bring himself to look Nathan in the face. He just kept frantically going through the rest of the documents until his fingers finally landed on the legal document that prevented him from accessing his money. He was shaking so hard he almost dropped it. I said in a steady voice, "It's all off limits. Your personal bank accounts, your business holdings, even that cute little stash you thought you'd tucked away safely in the Cayman Islands." My attorney really did a fantastic job. The look of victory on Rebecca's face had completely disappeared. She asked, "Honey, what's going on? What does she mean when she says everything's frozen?" I looked at her, pretending to feel bad for her. "It just means that your source of income can't get to any of his funds right now, darling. Or, well, he can't really use them. I hope you still have your ticket home because it seems like that dream house on the beach in Bermuda is probably not happening." The invited guests just stood there, completely speechless. My friend Laura, who had been a huge help in uncovering their scheme, wasn't doing a very good job of trying to hide her amusement behind her hand. Benjamin's younger brother Thomas shook his head in disapproval while his wife, Catherine, quietly said to me, "You go, Anna." Benjamin spat out, his mask of composure completely gone, that I had wrecked everything. I got nearer to him, softening my voice so that only he would be able to make out my words. "Actually, you're the one who screwed things up the instant you made the decision to stab our family in the back. I'm simply making sure you answer for what you've done." The pile of documents fell out of his hand, spreading all over the floor like leaves that had fallen from trees. Rebecca hastily bent down to gather them, her face bright red with shame as she came to the realization that their flawless scheme was falling apart right there for everyone to witness. Benjamin's collected attitude disintegrated as he got to the very last document, an official letter from the people on his company's board. His fingers squeezed the paper with so much pressure that it started to crease on the sides. The letter described a prompt inquiry into his relationship with Rebecca, referencing the possibility of abusing his authority and using the company's property improperly. He said barely audibly, his voice scratchy with shock, that I had gone to the board. I responded in a level tone that I didn't even have to do that. "As it turns out, someone else had noticed your improper behavior with a person working under you. The ethics committee had been keeping an eye on you for several months now." Rebecca's face lost all its color. She asked what that would mean regarding her job. "Well," I responded, placing my champagne glass on a nearby surface, "I think that in HR terms, it's called getting fired right away." Although, considering the situation, landing another job around Minneapolis could prove to be a bit tough. Benjamin abruptly stood up straight, trying to take charge of the situation once more. He declared that this was absurd. "That company, I created it from scratch." I interrupted, "They can't just—" "But actually, they can and they have. It seems the board has some real worries about possible legal actions." "From what I hear, you're not the only executive who thought he could exploit his power with younger employees." Nathan moved ahead, now holding his graduation cap. "I am truly disgusted that you would do this, Father. To my mother, to what our family stands for, to all we've established." Grabbing for Nathan's arm, Benjamin begged, "Son, you're not understanding the situation. Marriages, sometimes they just fall apart." Nathan pulled back sharply from his grasp. "There is no way to excuse what you've done. You planned on taking Mom's money and taking off with your assistant on the day of my graduation." "I get it completely." Now trying to regain control, Rebecca tried to save what she could. "Benjamin, they have no proof of anything between us." We have the ability to contest this. My laughter rang out, cutting through the air with a sharp tone. The string of emails where the two of you mapped out this whole thing, including today's news, plus the hotel bills and statements from people you work with, I believe they have plenty of evidence. While several attendees had quietly left, many were still there, watching the drama play out with a combination of surprise and captivation. Benjamin's brother Thomas walked over, resting a comforting hand on Nathan's shoulder. "For how long has this been going on?" Thomas questioned, his voice filled with sadness. "How long have you had this idea of leaving your family anyway?" Benjamin's lack of response spoke volumes. Instead, Rebecca retorted, her tone sharp with defensiveness and frustration. "Our love affair began a year and a half ago. We shouldn't feel the need to keep our relationship a secret. A year and a half," I considered, gently touching my chin. "Fascinating. That's precisely the length of time that I've been recording all of this. Each financial exchange, each rendezvous, and each insignificant untruth. I just had this hunch that it might be useful at some point." The impact of this truth seemed to overwhelm Benjamin. While he was carefully plotting his departure, I was one step ahead, diligently constructing an unbreakable argument against him. His flawless scheme, his hopes for a fresh start with his young colleague, and his cleverly concealed funds were all escaping his grasp like grains of sand. Benjamin made a final frantic effort to rescue the remains of his collapsing existence. "Anna, let's be rational," he pleaded, softening his voice to the persuasive tone he'd so frequently employed during business discussions. "We can come to an understanding. Just divide everything equally 50-50. Let's keep this amicable." 50-50, I repeated with authentic enjoyment coloring my tone. "Specifically 50-50 of what? The funds you attempted to conceal? The business that's on the verge of firing you? Or perhaps you're referring to the residence that's exclusively under my ownership?" His head jerked up. "What do you mean only in your name? Remember the previous month when you were occupied and couldn't make it to the mortgage refinancing appointment? You simply signed the documents I provided at home." I grinned, observing the understanding spread across his expression. "Seriously, Ben, you ought to read papers before you put your signature on them. The ownership of the house has been shifted over to solely my name." Rebecca clutched at Benjamin's arm. I could hear the fear climbing in her tone. "What's the deal with the Bermuda real estate? And what happened to our down payment?" I informed her that it's tied up, as is every other financial move you've attempted over these past 6 months. Although, I've got a hunch that the guy building that property might be interested to hear the money you used was gained through illegal means. Benjamin's features twisted with pure fury. "You've been deceived, that's enough, Dad," Nathan interrupted, his voice ringing out. "Don't you even think about completing that sentence." The other people gathered there stood by, absolutely silent, as the carefully put-together image Benjamin presented finally cracked and fell apart. His shoulders sagged, and suddenly he appeared like the age he actually was. I explained, maintaining my composure, that I've been in contact with your lawyer, Patricia. Considering what's happened, she's drawn up a settlement offer that's pretty fair, all things considered. You can sign this right now, or we can simply allow the judge to make the decision after he's taken a look at everything we have. It's up to you." Rebecca backed away from Benjamin, and I could see the beginnings of real terror forming on her youthful face. "You swore you'd provide me with stability," she murmured to him. "You told me we'd have everything taken care of." "Oh, sweetie," I responded, nearly starting to feel bad for her. "He promised me security too, all the way back 25 years. And you can see how great that turned out." Thomas moved closer to his brother, and I could clearly see the revulsion on his face. "Have you been using that lake house, the one you've been keeping up for my parents, for your little secret getaways as well?" Benjamin's lack of response spoke volumes. "I'm going to be the one to break the news to them," Thomas said sharply. "They deserve to understand just what their son has turned into." Nathan, still dressed in his graduation gown, straightened up. "I believe it's time for you two to go," he announced, his voice remaining firm even though he was clearly upset. "You two have already wrecked enough of this day." I stood there observing Benjamin as his whole life seemed to crumble. His son's graduation, which he had picked as the perfect moment for his dramatic announcement, had instead become the setting for his complete and utter embarrassment. The murmurs and glares from our guests, the look of revulsion on his brother's face, the disapproval evident in his son's eyes, it was all hitting him at the same time. The paperwork for the settlement will be ready at Patricia's office come Monday, I mentioned, picking up my bag. Don't even think about trying to touch any of the funds before then. And Benjamin? I stopped and looked him directly in the eye, noticing his defeated expression. I think you should probably book a seat in the back of the plane for Bermuda. Upgrading to the fancy seats might be a little too expensive for you now. As Benjamin and Rebecca quietly left the graduation party, I turned back to the people who were still there, grinning widely. Okay, now that that bit of surprise entertainment has concluded, how about we get back to properly honoring Nathan's accomplishment? Laura hurried over and gave me a hug. Anna, that was truly amazing, she murmured. I don't think I've ever seen Benjamin at a loss for words before. Nathan put his arm around me. I told Mom I was amazed she'd managed to keep all of this secret for so long. How did you remain so composed? Years of managing other people's money gave me quite a bit of composure, I said while giving his hand a gentle squeeze. And observing your father's endeavors fail was worth all the delay. Thomas lifted his drink. A toast to Anna, who just put on the most gratifying display of justice I think I've ever seen. And here's to Nathan, whose graduation will definitely be something to remember for a long time. The rest of the people there laughed and tapped their glasses together. The stress in the room turned into a festive mood as everyone came over to properly congratulate Nathan. Thomas's wife, Catherine, took me to the side. That letter from the board, you really managed to nail the timing, right? I smiled a little. The committee focused on ethics had been putting together their case for months now. I only ensured that their announcement happened at the same time as his planned departure. Being on time is crucial when you're talking about money and payback. As we moved the party to the restaurant that I had booked, making sure to choose one that Benjamin wasn't planning on using, I felt like I was floating. The burden of Benjamin's treachery and deceit had been replaced by a feeling of victory and independence. Nathan leaned in and quietly said, "This is the best graduation present I could have asked for, Mom." After a couple of weeks had passed, I found myself sitting in front of Patricia at her office in downtown Minneapolis, going over the last details of the divorce agreement. Benjamin didn't put up any resistance when he signed everything. He seemed to have lost all desire to argue after our run-in on graduation day. The corporate ethics investigation had actually revealed even more than what I had discovered initially. A few other young assistants had stepped up and shared accounts of Benjamin's unsuitable actions. As a result, the board fired him on the spot, and his good name within the business world was completely ruined. It seems Rebecca, dealing with her own problems at work, had quickly given up on their plans for starting over somewhere new. I believe she ended up moving back in with her folks in Chicago, her vision of living a carefree life as a trophy wife in Bermuda totally ruined. Patricia told me, as she was sorting through the final documents, that the house was safe, our money was protected, and the proof of tax evasion had been turned over to the appropriate officials. I'd have to say that, considering what happened, this has been one of the most straightforward divorces I've dealt with. That night, Nathan, who had taken a job here in Minneapolis, took me out for a meal. "You know, Mom, I've been giving your actions some thought, and how cleverly you navigated everything." I was touched by the confidence he had in me, and I smiled. "Perhaps I would be interested, though I hope you've learned to look carefully at all the details in any agreements before signing them." He chuckled. Believe me when I say that the whole family learned something that day that will carry with us. I remember just feeling this sense of tranquility as we were eating our supper. You know, occasionally, the greatest way to get back at someone doesn't involve just settling the score. It involves becoming a better person and getting ready for the next challenge, whatever that may be.